be for a road improvement public hearing for Ebony Street Northwest and Garnet Street between 185th and 189th. And now then, it's 7:02. If people do join us later, this presentation we're going to give is on the website. So the PowerPoint is there and available. We'll start with our city engineer. Many of you have probably seen this type of presentation before, or something like this from the city. But for those that haven't seen it, we'll give the full presentation. And then we will open it up after the presentation for questions and comments. So Shane, I'll open it up to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'm going to start with sharing my screen. I'm going to turn my ringer back on, and just in case it kicks me off again. I don't know if that's the reason, but so this is a public improvement hearing for Ebony and Garnet Street. And now then, I think this is my fourth or fifth one for these roads. And I realize they have been challenging, but I think we have a pretty good project to present to the residents tonight. So shown here on the screen in the red line would be the project limits or project extents. So again, it's Ebony Street from 185th Avenue up to the cul-de-sac, and then Garnet Street from the intersection with the cul-de-sac up to 189th Lane. Just a little bit of background. We have 34 miles of paved roads, 29 miles of gravel roads. So this project at just under a mile represents a pretty small segment of our overall road system. We just don't levy enough money to fully fund reconstruction and other major improvement projects. Also, this project is currently being considered for 2021. So the original pavement was constructed in 1992, which means it's about 28 years old now. There was a repair made fairly early on, back in the late 90s, early 2000s. And then since then, the city has made several repairs in various locations. In the areas that haven't been repaired, there's some pretty prevalent surface deterioration, a lot of alligator cracking, pattern cracking, etc. Here I just have a few pictures showing the current condition of the road. This is the patch that was done on Ebony Street, just kind of north of 185th Avenue. So this I want to kind of call special attention to because this section of pavement is still good. And we are proposing a slightly different improvement to this area of pavement. You can see back here, there's the gravel where the culvert was replaced. This picture shows looking up into the Ebony Street cul-de-sac. This shows the area where the cattails were removed from the ditches, allowing those to drain better and to hold less water near our road subgrade. So just in general, this road, we are aware it has been failing for quite a few years, and it's again looked like this with pattern cracking and alligator cracking in several areas for at least the past 10 or 15 years. So where are we at now? This project, we originally were considering doing this project in 2020, but kind of held off as we realized that this project might require more resources than we had available for this year. We then obtained some new soil borings this year. Our previous soil borings were 10 years old. And it was important to understand if the subgrade condition has changed over the past 10 years. We just recently replaced all the road culverts. And again, as I mentioned earlier, we removed the cattails in the ditches, and the road is currently just backfilled with gravel. That's kind of a temporary measure, and it allows allows those culvert replacements to go through one freeze thaw cycle, allowing for any settlements before that those areas are paved. So in 2020, we did 14 soil borings, which are shown on this exhibit. And in general, we found that the subgrade is sufficient. We're really interested in these N value numbers, which are different measurements that are taking as the soil boring is advanced through the surface, and it helps us understand the condition of the subgrade before entering into the road project. We'll just scroll through these really quick. So in general, we found that the aggregate base ranged probably from about 4 inches in the original condition to, in some of the repaired sections, we had 10 to 12 inches of existing aggregate base. So our proposed improvements would consist of reclaiming the existing failed bituminous. The city would then haul in new aggregate base. We would repair any subgrade areas that appeared to be soft or problematic. After passing the required tests, we would then pave the new bituminous surface to a compacted thickness of 3.5 inches. The segment of Ebony Street that I mentioned earlier that is still in good condition, that would just receive a bituminous overlay of 1.5 inches. We'd match all the driveways, reestablish a gravel shoulder, and then add topsoil to the inslopes as needed. And we are not planning on replacing all or driveway culverts with the exception of just 1 or 2 of them. Maybe I'll back up in my presentation. Let's see if I can spot it here. I know I'm in the general, here we go. So in this area, this culvert is greater than 50% full. And those culverts we would consider either excavating the accumulated sediment out of the ditch or placing that culvert at a higher location to make sure that that culvert functions for the next 20 years. So the next few slides are just kind of an example of what the construction process looks like. This machine is a reclaiming machine. In this photograph, the reclaim machine has already made its pass in this direction, turning the existing pavement, mixing it into the aggregate base and mixing a thicker aggregate base section. It is now traveling in this direction. You can see in front of the tires the existing pavement, and that is ground up with this machine. And behind it, again, we receive now the existing aggregate base thickness plus the pavement thickness. So we automatically increase our base thickness by doing this process. From that, sorry, missed a slide. From that, the aggregate base is shaped.
Should I call the number 2?
In this, can everyone still hear me okay? Okay, so it will be shaped. In this case, we would bring in additional gravel base where needed. We would then compact that. And then we would pave the new bituminous surface in 2 lifts. So this typical section shows the typical section for the area to be reclaimed. Again, 3.5 inches of new bituminous surface. Our aggregate base would consist of the existing plus reclaim, and in this example, any imported material necessary to achieve our section. We would have a class 5 aggregate shoulder, and then topsoil on the inslopes to match into the existing grade. So the total estimated project cost is $447,500. That includes the cost that the city is proposing to pay for culvert replacements, and is also sub-base work and the additional aggregate base. The remaining cost of what we call the pavement replacement cost is $288,000. And of that, the city would propose to assess 50% to the benefiting properties. So the benefiting properties are shown on this exhibit with the circles with the blue numbers inside of them. So in general, we assess on a per unit basis, and each property identified here would be assessed 1 unit. There are 20 benefiting properties. So again, assessing 50% of the pavement replacement cost of $288,000 would yield an assessment of $7,400 per unit. That would be, if residents so chose, they could pay that in full prior to November of next year. If they take no action, that will simply be added to their taxes, amortized over time, generally 10 years. And I should mention that interest rates are still pretty favorable. Generally, interest rates for assessments such as this are in the order of 5 to 6%. So this last slide shows a potential schedule for this project. We're here tonight at the public improvement hearing. There are several steps that are required in order to advance this through the public approval process. The city council could either at its meeting tonight or at its meeting in January consider to order the improvement. We would then prepare plans and specifications, submit those to the city council for approval. That's currently anticipated for February of this year. We would then advertise for bids. We would estimate that the bid opening could be held in March for this project. After we have the bid opening, right now all of our numbers are estimates, and as we go kind of down this process, our numbers are refined as we get better information. So at this date, which is estimated to be March of 2021, is when we would actually have contractor bids. So at that point, we kind of transition from estimating what this project would cost to knowing what the project will cost. Once we know what this project will cost, then we send out the assessment hearing notices. That assessment hearing could be in April of 2021. And then assuming that the city council awarded the contract, construction could start shortly thereafter, likely in June of 2021 or whenever load limits go off. And this project would have a fairly quick time frame, and so we would likely have a August completion date for this project. As far as alternatives, if we delay the project or don't do the project, we generally are asked what will happen. And the city would consider, I believe, patching the gravel portions, so the areas where the culverts were replaced. But in the remaining sections of road, the surface will continue to get worse. I would expect to see just more and more potholes. And in general, these projects do not get cheaper over time. They generally become more expensive as they're delayed. So with that, that concludes my presentation, and I will turn it back to the mayor.
Thank you, Shane. Attorney Rupy, did you have anything that you wanted to add here?
Just to emphasize to the residents that everything here with regard to numbers is just an engineer's estimate until the actual bids come back. Under Minnesota law, we are required to put this project out for sealed bids, and we have to go by law with the lowest responsible bidder. But these numbers, until we actually get those bids and have that bid opening, are all estimates. After that, when we open the bids, then we will have the second of the 2 required public hearings, this one being the first, which is called the assessment hearing. By that time, you will have gotten a notice with the actual amount proposed to be assessed against your property, and then that amount you can discuss with City Council. The point of no return on this project where we can't get out of it is when we award the contract. So we typically, as a policy, the City Council holds that assessment hearing, that second public hearing, before they award that contract. So they have an opportunity to hear from you, the residents, on that. But this is a decision whether to move forward or to award the contract rests with the City Council. There's never a vote of residents. This is your opportunity to provide the council with feedback on what you think about this project and whether you feel that this is they should move forward or not at this stage. And with that, I will turn it over back to the mayor.
Thank you, Bob. So this will be an opportunity now for residents to weigh in, comments, positive, negative, questions. I'd ask that you give your name. We'll have one person talk at a time. Give your name and address, and I'll recognize you, and then you can ask your question. Did that come through?
This is Mark Palm. Can you hear me?
Yes, Mark.
Oh, great. I do have, I guess, maybe a couple of questions. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Mark Palm, 18793 Garnet Street. I think my initial question would be is this collective meeting, and maybe I guess I caught a little bit of that, is this more of like a presentation meeting of, and I say this very objectively, a kind of a solidified plan that Shane had presented, or are you still entertaining, I'll say, suggestions, offerings, ideas, plans, what have you, from the residents?
At this point, we asked Shane to conduct a feasibility study, take a look at what the potential cost would be, what improvements were necessary. That's where we came up with the culvert replacement, the ditch clean out. There'll be some other base work that would be done in the spring that wasn't reasonable to do in the fall here. These are improvements you want to see so they could winter over. But this is a formal feasibility presentation from Shane with the reasonable expectation of what we'd be doing going forward.
Okay, so largely solidified for the most
Yes.
part. Okay,
Yeah.
I was just trying to understand that. You know, honestly, I had really had a slew of questions up to earlier today. I was copied in an email from Shane, which I'll say for me personally kind of rather satisfied a lot of the questions that I had. The only thing I guess that comes to mind is to take the road, I say from an A to Z, north to south, the entirety of the road. Is it, Shane, is it still better to, I guess when I think of grinding up that bituminous, those areas that are largely, there's just about dirt under there. I know and I understand there's areas that do have gravel, but to grind up, it's almost like setting that grinder at 2 to 3 inches deep, so you're grinding up just gravel. At the point at which that dirt is also ground up with it, isn't that making that whole, and I'm going to use these terms wrong because I'm not familiar, but the subgrade or the whole, you know, dirt substance under the asphalt, isn't introducing that into the mixture of that asphalt just weakening the whole system where there isn't gravel?
Mr. Mayor, the soil borings that we conducted can tell us that all of the areas have sufficient gravel with them, except with the exception of one. And so you are correct. In order to reclaim the bituminous, we need both things. We need the bituminous layer and then the gravel layer underneath it. But we can also do that in reverse. So in other cases, or where our soil boring has indicated we have no aggregate base in one area, our solution in those cases is to actually dump the gravel on the road surface and still go through the process. But the reclaimed bituminous actually doesn't have, it doesn't make it weaker, it makes it stronger. So a reclaimed aggregate base has more strength, more load carrying capacity than just a normal, like a virgin,
Soil.
aggregate base. Correct.
Okay, so to add, like I guess probably what's in a document I had read, like a 6 to 9 inches of gravel mixed in with that bituminous, it serves more or serves a better value to add that gravel after the grinding's done?
So there are certain targets for the finished product, and those targets are based on MnDOT studies and MnDOT testings and different gradations. So it's called a sieve analysis, and at the end of the reclaiming, we actually test the recycled product using the sieve analysis to make sure that everything is within the specified ranges. So there are procedures ahead of time to estimate kind of call it the recipe for that. But yes, we are trying to hit certain targets when reclaiming, and those targets will be met. Otherwise, a contractor does not get paid for that work or is penalized for those work items.
Okay. And I guess the only last question I had, I certainly don't want to monopolize time. If the collective road was raised again like 6 to 9 inches, I guess I'm trying to find the words, the understanding of what would happen to those homes, I'll say, and subsequent driveways that really don't have a grade from road to garage. So largely, if they're for the most part flat and that road gets raised 6 to 9 inches in total, I would guess even at a 9 inches of height, that's probably to the top of the new asphalt. But to raise the road up that much, would it not cause any like water problems for those that have a very flat driveway as it stands now?
Flat driveways are challenging. In this project, I've driven this project several times, and I think there are only 1 or 2 driveways that are going to be a little bit challenging. And a lot of the houses are set a couple of feet above the road, and there's plenty of grade. And we actually survey those. We survey each individual driveway. We've already done that. And so we can determine based on the final elevation of the road, just how far back we have to go to have an acceptable driveway slope.
Okay. And the one in question that came to my mind is Brozak's driveway across from us. It's quite flat. And it was just kind of that example of, to raise the road up, it kind of that, what would you call it, properties of water. It's like the water has nowhere to go but back toward the house.
Right. Yeah, we would never create a situation where the water is draining from the driveway back to the house or back to a garage and without anywhere to go. In some cases, the driveway is already sloped to a garage. In that case, we can't raise that garage, but we don't ever do anything to make a condition worse.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
This is Bill Casey, 18720 Ebony Street. I guess to address Shane in your presentation, something that strikes me as quite alarming is we've been here since 92. We have seen, I don't know, upwards of a dozen road repairs over that time span. Certain areas have been repaired once, twice, 3 times, 4 times. And it's alarming to me to hear the soil boring tests came back with a positive or an acceptable level of subgrade gravel which in turn would imply it has adequate drainage. And I would ask the question, why, if that's the case, has this road kind of self-destructed every couple of years since 1992?
Yeah, Mr. Casey, I think maybe I wasn't clear enough on one of my slides, but the soil borings informed us of the condition of the subgrade. And it also informed us that we have a relatively thin aggregate section under the existing pavement. So if you heard that I said that the aggregate base is thick enough for the ultimate road construction, that is not correct. We have like 2,800 tons estimated for importing into this road to achieve a thick enough gravel base section. And that's a construction cost of about $70,000. In addition to that, we have about $20,000 in subgrade repairs planned based on the soil boring data. And so we do plan to, I'm aware that this project has been kind of spot repaired multiple times. And the approach for this project is to do it holistically, to repair the entire road and not just continue with the spot repairs.
So your comment of bringing in the aggregate to dump it on top of the bituminous and then grind it all up together, is that, maybe I missed a page there somewhere, is that where Mark implied the road level is raising upwards of 9 inches from where it is now? Is that because of that additional aggregate?
That is correct, because of the additional aggregate and because of the new 3.5-inch pavement section. In places, the road elevation will be raised up to 8 or 9 inches. It's not a consistent 8 or 9 inches across the entire road. The section of Ebony Street that's still in good condition that we're proposing to, just overlay. So that'd be south of where you're at. That would only raise 1.5 inches.
Okay, but you're grinding up all the bituminous. So you're not just overlaying?
We are grinding up all of the bituminous north of the big patch on Ebony Street. So are you familiar with the big patch on Ebony Street as you come off of 185th?
Yep.
The big patch stops at the property address 18623. And so we would grind everything from that address or from where that match point is north.
Right, so Bill's question, you're not grinding the entire length of the road structure.
That is correct. We are not proposing to grind up the pavement that's still in really good condition.
Where would I find that? Pardon my humor, but what area, just out of curiosity, what area is good? I mean, in all seriousness.
It is the area between the intersection to go up to the Ebony Street cul-de-sac.
Yep.
South, doesn't make it all the way to 185th, but there's about 400 or 500 feet of pavement that patch is, I don't have the date in front of me, but it was completed within the relatively recent past.
Okay.
And that pavement is still in really good condition.
Yeah, the length of the house, the second house in from 185th.
Right. Yeah, the new patched area. Okay. Fair enough. I'll give you that. That is pretty decent.
But other than that, everything north of that on Ebony and Garnet up to 189th would be reground. And south of that patch to 185th.
Okay.
And this is Kelly Casey, 18720 Ebony Street. So I'm the you buy a sweater and you don't like it, you return it. So every time that they've repaired the roads, like Ebony, for instance, right in front of Geegan's house, literally within the same year of repairing them, they broke up. And we started having problems with them. Is there something that says, I don't know whose responsibility that is, Shane, maybe you, but is there anything that says if we do this and we pay this amount of money that we get a nice sweater without holes?
It's gonna last 15 years?
I mean, and part of it is the bus coming through there. I mean, the bus comes up through the cul-de-sac every single day. That's obviously not happening right now, but it's, I mean, literally before the plows come in, every time it's been repaired. I mean, maybe I'm wrong and out of line, but I think the people that live on the cul-de-sac would all agree that one spot there is really bad. And I'm just wondering, so you guys do that and then next year it's all tore up again. What do we do?
Well, if I might ask to add on to what Kelly, and correct me if I'm wrong, Kelly, if I'm asking the right question, but I think kind of partly what she's getting at is that road section fails so much to right in there to what she's referring to. Is it going to be better to add on to what's there versus digging it down, excavating out more of that really poor dirt underneath?
So are we talking about just north of the split there where Garnet pulls off, where we did the patch previously?
Yeah, the patch was done. It was the only patch that was done. It's been that way all year. I think it was done last year. Yeah, right in front of Geegan's. So it would be like if you're coming into the development and you take a right to go into the cul-de-sac, it's that first section right there in front of Mershman's and Geegan's. And I think it was done the end of last year. And so it's been dirt this whole time. And then they came in with their Tonka toys just recently and tore everything up again. And it's actually not in bad shape right now. But I think that we know that every time they put bituminous over it, I mean, literally, it doesn't take but a couple of months for it to not even
One
to tear up
free
again.
thaw cycle.
And it just splits open like a volcano. And maybe you're addressing that, Shane. I'm not questioning that at all. I'm just saying that I mean, everybody on here is probably going to shoot me in the neighborhood, but I'd rather have dirt than go through what we go through every time you guys come in and fix this and we pay for it, only to have it be tore up, because it's almost worse to have all those big pieces of bituminous out there. And then you get the plows. So then the plows are plowing it into the ditches, you know, and it just becomes a mess.
You know, and Shane, I'll let you address that, but part of the logic last year when we did that patch, because we did have problems every spring with the road erupting there. And so we had the city staff go out and dig down and repair that with the intention of, again, leaving it over the winter so it could go through a freeze thaw cycle. I do believe, you know, when we looked at this spring, the gravel patch did not have the eruptions that we had seen underneath the blacktop. So that was part of the previous repair. Now, obviously, with the additional materials that the project will be bringing in, you know, part of the project plan is to make sure that we have the base, the subgrade properly repaired. And you do actually do a pressure test on that. If I'm right, Shane, you actually roll it and look how it compresses. And so the intention is to, when we get this fixed, you know, the patches have, some of them held up pretty well, some of them not very well at all. The idea is to get it all repaired at one time so that we have, you know, a decade or three of good road without the eruptions. So we repair the subgrade, we grind the bituminous back in, we raise the bed, but it is to do the repair and get it all fixed at one time so that the blacktop does hold up and we don't see what we've seen in years past. Shane, you want, we also, I think the reason for taking the cattails out, for putting the drain tile in on the lower section there that was relatively flat, making sure the drainage is there so the water isn't sitting underneath the road and freezing up into the subgrade as well. So I think that's part of the repairs we've been doing this fall. So, but Shane, you want to speak to it?
And Jeff,
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, just
Jeff, I would totally agree. That spot in the road was in the best condition that we've, I think, ever seen it in the years that we've been here, this spring. So I would agree with that, you know, tearing it out last year, and it definitely doesn't, it's nowhere near what it was when we kept patching it. Sorry, Shane, go ahead.
Yeah, just to add to what the mayor has stated, I mean, I think in the past, we just haven't done as extensive of repairs that were necessary. And the patch that we're just discussing on Ebony Street, that was a more expensive repair. And really, it's all about that aggregate base thickness. And so now with this project, we are proposing to import a lot of additional aggregate base. So we have that same kind of repair methodology over the entire roadway.
Additional comments or questions?
Can you hear me?
Yes, who's speaking?
Oh, so this is Mark Palm. I'm
Oh,
sorry,
Mark.
my computer keeps going back to mute on its own. I have a question for Shane. You know, a very objective question. You've done so much investigation, so much work on the entire length of the road. If you were to go from that north end to south end, is there any parts of the whole project that gives you any prospect of doubt that it's like, okay, here's what we can do to 200 feet of this section or 500 feet of this section? Is there anything that you have doubts in your mind that collectively this whole project, it's like, well, you know, we know that we're going to do everything uniformly, but it's like this section still has a little bit of weakness. We're just hoping that it's going to cover this area, if that makes sense. Any doubts you have for any areas, any sections? Because not to pick your words apart, Mr. Mayor, but, you know, it's like when you said, you know, 10 years to 30 years, if we're all getting assessed and even future residents on the road, I know that everybody's looking for a lot more than 10 years of stability for that road.
If I can address that, Mr. Mayor. So when our goal is to build a 20-year road. And on this particular project, I mean, it's really just a case of the pavement section was always too thin. That was, we've done a lot of soil borings. We don't have terrible subgrade soils. It's just when there's not enough aggregate base and not enough pavement structure on top of them, it doesn't disperse the load well enough. And then the underlying subgrade yields under pressure. And that causes the pavement to deflect and crack. So really it's not going to be rocket science. There may be areas that require more work and that we don't know of, but those will show themselves during construction. While we are hauling in this, you know, all this gravel, I mean, there's going to be truck after truck after truck of loaded dump trucks coming in here. And I mean, that is the best way to see if we have a soft spot or an area that yields under a load. And if we see that, it'll be a process of letting the city council know that, hey, we have some areas that require some additional subgrade work. And in order to achieve the longevity that we're trying to with this project, we need to correct these areas. And that's the intent of this project now, is to really go through and correct all the areas that need correction and then pave it so that we can build a road that will last 20 years and hopefully even closer to 30 years with crack filling and proper maintenance.
So Shane,
Okay.
this is Bill Casey again. On that comment, maybe this is more for the mayor. So when you go through, you get the bids, you do the borings, everyone's kind of on the same page, you get the bids, you go with contractor A, doesn't really matter who you go with, but they come in, they start working and realize, oh, this is going to take a lot more work in a couple, 3, 4 areas than we thought. There's going to be upcharges. How does that work? Who eats the upcharges, and is that to the burden of the residents? Or
And the council, feel free to weigh in on this, but the council has determined that because of the initial challenges with this road, the base and the subgrade, the council has decided that we would pick up those costs. So the cost for the work's being done this fall, the culverts, the ditch work, that is not part of this project cost that will be assessed. And so if Shane, as he identified, as the trucks are coming in, we find a weak spot that needs additional materials and work to bring it up to spec, the city would pick that up. Once we determine the assessment preliminary, the bids from the contractors will be fixed to a certain point. There's some fluctuation, as I said, most years we've come in at or slightly below the engineer's estimate. But then we come in, you will know, and again, Bob, you can correct me if I'm overstating it here, but if there is subgrade work, the city is picking that up at this point.
Once, Mr. Mayor, this is for those, I'm Bob Rupi, the city attorney. Before this project begins, before we award the contract to the lowest responsible bidder, you will have received in the mail a notice of another public hearing with your assessment amount. And what is being proposed here is if additional work on the subgrade is identified and determined that needs to be done, that would be a cost borne by the city. Your assessment amount would not be increased to pay for that additional work. That's what the council is proposing. And typically that is what most cities and towns do. If additional work is identified that they want to do to increase the strength and longevity of the road, that they will absorb those costs in the regular road and bridge budget.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
That's also why we pay Shane to do a good job up front, so there's very few surprises. But as you say, when you start bringing dump trucks full of material in there, if there's a surprise, that's when we'll find it and we'll take care of it. So.
Hi, I've got one question for Shane.
Is this Patrick?
This is Pat, yeah, Geegan, 18670 Ebony Street. Is there any advantage to go to a single vendor for garbage? Is that a consideration with how long a road, stays intact?
My response is yes, there is definitely an advantage. Your garbage truck is probably the heaviest vehicle on your road. And I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it's something like one garbage truck does the equivalent damage or wear to the road as like 200,000 passenger vehicles. So it's extreme, just because of the weight. So generally, it's if cities try to request a single vendor, that's usually met with a lot of opposition. But if neighborhoods get together on their own, I've seen it work really successfully, especially in conjunction with these road projects, where you reach out to your vendors and say, hey, we have 20 residents. We're all considering using the same vendor, and would you give us a discounted rate? Generally, they will give you a discounted rate, and that will also make your road last longer.
Other questions or comments?
This is Mark Palm. I have another question, but I don't want to keep talking.
Well, until somebody's fighting you for the microphone, you got it, Mark.
Okay. Well, another question for you, probably, Mr. Mayor. Somewhat relates to the road, but it is still an environmental impact to our road. The county ditch, and I'll just speak from the section of where it goes under Jasper, weaves kind of down and through, and then comes back out on 185th. By terminology of it being a county ditch, it holds water, transports water. It seems to, over the years, not be carrying as much as it used to. It's almost like the ditch is kind of filled in. Does the city have any voice to, if it's the county, that ditch was dug so many decades ago, apparently, I'll just say to the county, there must have never been a plan to come back and clean it out, redig it out, kind of just get that water moving, because there's a lot of that spring and fall where if we do get kind of wetter periods, that it just kind of sits there. Is there any possibility of, if it is the county, having somebody come back out and dig it out more again?
Yeah, Shane, you probably know more on this. What we've seen throughout the city is most of the county ditches have been turned over to the private parties that they're on. We have had private parties dig those out. And if you remember about 10 years ago or so, we did that first big patch just down in the waterway that runs behind Rickards there. We actually got permission at that time to go down through the property and clean out the ditch all the way down to 185th. Now, when we are out walking this fall, looking at that, I think that there's still some problems south of 185th down to Trot Brook that still needs to be opened up. But these right now are on private property, and I am not aware anywhere in the city that the county is actually maintaining any of those ditches. Shane, you would know better, though.
That is correct, Mr. Mayor. There is a statute for county ditches, but it essentially requires all parties to agree to pay the cost for cleaning those ditches out. And as we become, as we go from a couple of large farm owners to several individual property owners, it just becomes logistically almost impossible to get 100% support and fund those projects. I've been involved in a couple of projects where that process was investigated. I have never actually seen a county ditch cleaned out unless it was somebody kind of volunteering to pay all the cost.
Oh, and that's interesting to know. I didn't know that had kind of gone back to, I'll say, ownerships respectively.
Well,
We've had some cases where,
Mr. Mayor, there may be other like ditch authorities and stuff like that under, I think it's statute chapter 103E, but there are different types of ditches, different ownerships. I don't know what is there. If it's believed that this is the county, then I think the property owners would best be served by lobbying the county commissioners to investigate options for improving that ditch system so that it transports stormwater and such adequately. But I can't, there's many different issues here with these different types of ditches. And so not knowing exactly how this was, quote, set up, and if we believe this is a county ditch, then the lobbying would need to start with the county commissioners, your county officials.
and to this point, most of the people that are still farming and have water standing in the fields are taking it upon themselves to clean those ditches and open the drain tiles and get the ditches flowing again. So the only time it's been done in this neighborhood, we rented equipment, did it ourselves down as far as 185th. But we do know that it's valuable to get the water out of the ditches. Thus the ditch work we did this fall. Obviously there's standing water if you've got cattails. That stretch on Ebony just before it splits off to Garnet on the east side there was relatively flat. That now has drain tile in it. So we think with the new larger culverts, we should be moving water much more effectively. We just have to see if it keeps going downstream to Trot Brook. So
I don't know what kind of a question this is, whether it's a meaningful one, but with the, I'll say driveway to driveway as you go up and down the road, as the road would be raised in its final state, if there was a problem, I'll just speak for our driveway, our culvert. I understand culvert movement or management or not necessarily replacement, but if something had to be done with a driveway culvert during this whole project, say ours, for example, needed to be moved up or down for whatever reason, do we have the chance during that whole construction to work with the contractors to have that done? I wouldn't necessarily want to have to try to get a contractor, a separate contractor in there during or after the fact to have something done, even if it was at our cost to certainly get water to move properly. Would they be engaged? Could they be engaged to do such things?
Shane, you want to take that?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, that's going to be really the decision of whichever contractor is awarded the project. So it's very similar to paving of driveways. We often are asked during these road projects if I'm interested in replacing my entire driveway. Is that something I can do as an additional cost? Some contractors will do it. Some contractors say no. We only deal with governmental agencies and larger commercial entities. So we don't really have any control over whether or not a contractor would work directly for a private homeowner and replace that culvert.
Oh, okay. And I was going to say, not the driveway. Yeah, this is my question specific to the culvert. If something had to be done with it, moving it up, down, sideways for whatever reason.
Right.
It's the same concept. It is something as simple as adjusting the culvert versus somebody saying, "There's a great opportunity. You got your truck here. Why don't you do the whole driveway?" It's going to be individual. What has been our experience with the contractors we've been using in recent years, Shane? Have they been amenable to side projects, if you will?
Not so much in the last couple of years. I think, we've been, for the contractors, for the previous at least 2 or 3 construction seasons, they've had an abundance of work. And so they could kind of pick and choose projects that they wanted. And I haven't seen them as willing to do kind of add-on projects or, something in additional to the scope. They simply told me when I've asked them or approached them, we're too busy. So now with this year, I'm not sure how the market is going to be for them or how their workloads will be, but it's really going to be up to each individual contractor.
Well, and most of what I was referring to, Shane, is not so much as and again, this is just an example, but if it did come about for if it was 1 driveway, 5 driveways, it wasn't like a requested item. It's almost like, say they were going by my house, road work is done, and all of a sudden you find out that it's like, this culvert's going to be way too low or maybe way too high. In order to get the whole water drainage to work, this thing has to be moved. I would have to believe as part of the contract that would be recognized and something would have to be done. They're not going to just move on with their part of the project. And now the me or whomever else would be left with a problem after the fact. Now it's tearing up the end of the road, end of a driveway again into the road to have to fix something because they wouldn't touch it.
So Shane, let's say that the example you showed in the picture, you said there were 1 or 2 of them where they either need to be cleaned out or repositioned. What would happen in those that the drainage is an issue?
So if we include them as a contract item, they would be required to be completed by the contractor. And it's a little bit easier for the city to add something on to a contract than for an individual resident. So we have an existing contract with the contractor. We have, they're usually when working for a city, the money's always good. and contractors will do additional work. Where the kind of the challenge comes in is under the 429 assessment process, we're required to assess all like properties the same amount. So for this project, we're estimating the assessment amount of 7,400. We're not simply able just to add on certain things, even if the property owner says they're willing to pay for the extra cost. We're not necessarily willing or able to do that and assess a bunch of different properties differently. So that's where the challenge comes in. We can include things like culvert replacements in our project. It's just when it goes above and beyond the contract where and it gets into the individual homeowner requesting things of the contractor. That's where it becomes out of our control.
Makes sense, Mark?
Largely, yes. I probably wasn't being overly clear. Mine was more so out of somebody kind of standing back and out of you. It's like standing there saying out of necessity, okay, when we get done with the road, this driveway or that driveway or culvert, I shouldn't say driveway, this culvert is going to be very poorly positioned. Well, I guess a homeowner's going to have to worry about that after the fact. I would guess that the contractor would be looking at that and saying, well, something's going to have to be done here. Maybe it wasn't part of our or included in our immediate contract, but we better bring this up because they're just going to have problems after the fact. So not necessarily like a voluntary, hey, I'd like to move my culvert type of thing. It's more like, no, this is going to be a problem. So not you, but it's like saying you, the contractor, you have to address this somehow. You can't just move on with your project. And then after things are largely completed, now I have to do something to correct this for my own property.
So Shane, I would say that it probably when we walked it last fall, you identified a couple of spots where we would have to deal with the culverts to make sure the water continued to drain properly.
That's correct.
Those I would assume you'd make part of the project bid because it's going to affect the overall project drainage. If it was subjective or just needed to clean out is a little different than if we don't move this one, we're not going to get drainage. And you did identify maybe 2 or 3 spots when we walked the road last fall that I would assume you're going to make part of the project.
That is correct. And if there's anything that we feel is necessary to accommodate drainage, we're very interested in having good drainage because it affects the longevity of our road. And we can add items onto the contract. I just want to be clear, the city will be paying the cost in those cases.
And I bring part of this up just for the sake that there are some folks, as you've certainly seen, that not only have 2 driveways, but I speak more of they have 2 culverts.
Sure.
Other questions or comments?
Yeah, this is Meyer 1880 Garnet. Shane, I have your preliminary cost estimate here. I know it's not a big dollar amount, but one of the items is mailbox support, 20 each. I guess my question is, mailboxes, I guess I can't see a reason to replace them. You know, we're trying to save money when we can. Part I see on your estimate, engineering, legal, and administrative fees of $61,700, and then financing costs of $13,600. When this is all done, are we going to see a breakdown of all the bids so we can kind of see how we came up with the number?
Sure, so I can take that, Mr. Mayor. So the mailbox supports I included in the preliminary estimate just because, well, there's 2 reasons. One, a lot of times the mailbox themselves get in the way of the construction equipment. So if you think back of that reclaimer machine, big, wide, tall machine, and that has to go pavement edge to pavement edge. And a lot of times the mailboxes may overhang slightly into the pavement. And so a lot of those have to be removed so they're not hit and damaged. The other thing is USPS has certain height requirements, and they want the lip of the mailbox between 42 inches and 48 inches from the road edge. So if we, in some areas, if we have to add gravel and then we pave the new bituminous on top of that and we raise the road, say, up to 8 inches, well, now that mailbox is out of compliance and the residents will no longer receive their mail. Instead, they'll get a little red note that says your mailbox is out of compliance. Pick it up at the post office until you correct this issue. So we have them as a kind of a budgetary line item in the project currently. But if a mailbox didn't have to be replaced or adjusted, we wouldn't do it. So.
I guess-
As far
Go ahead.
as far as the second part of the question, after we received the bids, we received bids we received unit prices on each individual bid item. And so on this project, we'll probably have close to 30 bid items, and there will be a breakdown of each contractor's bid item. That's called a bid tabulation, and that was prepared after the bids are opened. And that does become public record.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, this is Pat Geegan again.
Pat, go ahead.
Regarding the timeline, is there any kind of penalty if this doesn't get done before winter? I'd hate to go through another winter of the area I live in without a road.
So, Mr. Mayor, our contracts, the city contracts do include completion dates, and they would include also liquidated damages if the contractors did not complete the project by that date.
It's one of the reasons we're starting this discussion now so that we can get in with the early part of the season so the contractors can bid before they fill up. If they start filling up their prices when they don't need the work, that it can affect their prices, but it also gets them started later in the season. So the sooner we can get in, get good prices, and they can get in, start working, we have a better opportunity to get done before fall becomes an issue, fall or winter. So it's one of the reasons we've learned to start our improvement hearings earlier in the year. Is that fair to say, Shane?
That's correct.
The one thing I would say about that, this is Kelly Casey, 18720, is I wasn't at the last meeting, but one of the comments of the residents was this always seems to get pushed to like the end of the season. And so we have nice paved roads for 30 days and then the snow flies and the plows come in and that's exactly what they did now. So now we have all this dirt, it's December, whatever. They literally just pulled out the last of the construction equipment and now we're going to move into winter and not really have an opportunity to enjoy it. Mark, I think, oh, he's not on there. Oh, yeah, he is. I think he kind of made that comment originally. It would be nice to push this through as quick as possible if ultimately the goal is to get it done next year instead of having it done in, August, September, October.
Yeah, we would, excuse me, we would be targeting, one of the reasons we did the construction this fall, we wanted it to winter over so things could settle. But the other thing is, this is, you know how long the construction was out there, the Tonkatoid, as you say, if we would have done that in the spring or early summer, that would have delayed the start even more, and we wouldn't have the compaction that we get over the winter. So we're trying to get a head start on this by doing the preliminary work now, anything we can that will winter over well. And as you saw from the schedule that Shane put up in the PowerPoint, we're looking at identifying this as a June start date. If we can coordinate accordingly. If this all makes sense, we're targeted to be ready to roll in the early part of the season. And of the two projects we're looking at this year, this is the shorter of the two, by estimate. So we would anticipate being done by August.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other? This is certainly, this is a good conversation, and comments or questions. And for those that aren't on, just want to reiterate, the PowerPoint is on our website, so they can go and see what Shane presented. This meeting will be posted, linked. The YouTube link will be on our website. They can go back and watch the hour we spent together here. If people didn't get a chance, they can put in writing. They can send an email or a letter to the office, and it will be forwarded to the council. And the council is also available if you want to contact them individually. But we're looking for feedback. At this point, we would anticipate our decision to become at our January meeting, which would be January 12th, to authorize Shane to start the next phase of the process, start putting the numbers together and working on the bids that will go out to the contractors.
I have one final question. I'm not sure who to address on this, but I've got a sneaking suspicion I know the answer to it. What kind of, on these type of projects, what type of warranties or guarantees or anything do these contractors typically provide to the municipalities?
Shane, can you handle that one?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, a 1-year warranty is typical. So that's what we require in our contracts. Along the way, in addition to what the city does, so when we do a major improvement project like this, we have several tests along the way. And if they don't pass those tests, they can't advance to the next phase. So for example, we do tests on the subgrade, we do tests on the aggregate base. We do both, testing by like an independent assurance agency, like a Braun Intertech or Halgo Geotechnical, somebody like that, and they come out and do numerical tests. And in addition, we do the roll test, which we discussed earlier. So in any case, we can't move to the next process until it passes the required tests. So by the city adopting those standards, and it's essentially MnDOT standards, that is how we ensure the longevity of the road. In addition to that, it would just be the city council. If something, if something unexpected happened, and I've seen in one case, in one community that Bob and I both represent, we had a house on fire in the spring of the year, and it wreaked havoc on the road because there was loaded pumper truck after loaded pumper truck full of water that had to go in and put the fire out. And the roads aren't built to, they're not built to hold any amount of traffic. We design them for a 9-ton axle weight. And so at that point, if there were to be damage to the road, it would just be the city council decision at that time, to make a repair if they felt it didn't make the last 20 years as it should.
I will also say, because this neighborhood has experienced when the township had that road put in, we didn't have the standards we do now today. When we first became a city, it's one of the things we worked with the engineering firm and the attorney's office to come up with road standards. So we have much more rigid standards these days. And as Shane said, we do monitor that throughout. We do the testing, and he has a project manager from his company that will oversee all aspects of this to make sure the road standards are met. So we do have much more effective standards today and verification along the way. So even though the warranty seems limited when you expect a 20 to 30 year life, the integrity of the reputation of the contractor along with the engineering firm and the testing firms all work together, we've had very good success. So much different than when that road went in under the township days.
Yeah, no kidding. So just to clarify, that all sounds good, but it's a year from when Shane or the council or Robert, whoever signs off on the project saying, yep, it's done to our satisfaction. The 1 year starts then. Is that a true statement?
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. It's it's called substantial completion, and that is defined in the specifications. But yeah, substantial completion is more or less when the project is done. There might be one or two punch list items that remain, a mailbox to adjust or something like that. But it's in general, both layers of bituminous have been constructed. The shouldering's all done. The topsoil's in. It's been seeded. It would be 1 year from that date of substantial completion.
Kind of a one freezing year.
That's correct.
Going through the cycle, yep.
Yep.
You know, to add on to what Bill had asked, I only asked this by virtue of proximity, 189th, 190th, kind of from a very similar soil types because it's right in the area. Shane, do you happen to know when they, finalized that road, have they had any, or has there been any, I'll say, trouble or repairs or any failures or anything yet? And I ask that because here we had that early snow in October and November where all of a sudden a plow truck had to be dispatched. Has there been any failures yet?
There have not been any failures. There was one area that required some correction near the culvert replacement on the north end of Dolomite where it intersects with 190th. And on that project, we did not have the luxury of replacing the culverts the year prior for the freeze thaw. But generally the freeze thaw takes care of those, or, you see all that settling during that first winter.
And if you're gonna look at unified garbage hauling, you might want to see if anybody wants to join your group, because wouldn't do any good to have you guys have one hauler and then have some companies up there cutting through your neighborhood to shortcut down to 185th or vice versa. So, but I have seen that be successful with a good pricing if the neighborhood wants to get a one hauler. So. I've also seen the torches and pitchforks come out when the city tries to impose it. I'm not sure.
It's worse than that. It's worse than that. Lawyers come out.
That's true.
I can tell you that is true because I deal with them when they threaten every lawsuit known to man when we try to start going down that path.
But the neighborhoods have had a lot of success doing that. So,
Is the city willing to provide a mailing list for us to start that ball rolling?
a mailing list of your neighbors.
Our development, the 189th Dolomite, 190th.
Bob, is that public information?
Yes, that would be public information.
So we do have a list because we just sent out all the mailings for 189th, 190th, and Dolomite because we just completed those projects. So we do have that list available. Certainly have your neighborhood right in front of us. So if the neighborhood would like that, identify a spokesperson so everybody's not calling Lori. And Lori, would you be willing to provide those addresses?
Lori?
Sorry, trying to get to the unmute. Yes, absolutely. Just give me a call or send me an email and I'd be happy to provide that.
Okay, we'll talk amongst the neighbors here first.
Yeah, so designate a chairperson so we're not all burying Lori with the same request. So, but I think it's a great idea. And Any other questions or comments?
Thank you.
We do appreciate your patience. We do appreciate your participation tonight. Again, if you have further questions, as something pops up after we close the meeting here, feel free to contact the office, the council members directly. Contact the office. Lori sends that information on to the council. So, and again, at this point, council, if you prefer, we would wait for a vote. We can vote tonight or vote January.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Rainville.
I would, I favor waiting till January to vote.
I prefer that too. So if the residents have anything else they can come up with, then we've got all the information prior to that. So. With that being said, and seeing no other hands up or speakers on, I'm going to accept a motion to close this public hearing or this improvement hearing.
So moved.
I get a second.
Second,
And a motion and a second. Lori, if you'll call roll, please.
Mayor Pilon,
Aye.
Councilmember Blake,
Aye.
Councilmember Greenberg,
Aye.
Councilmember Bryan,
Aye.
Councilmember Rainville.
aye.
Okay, the meeting is officially closed. Thank you all again for attending.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, team.